Hey everyone, welcome to our fourth instalment of Lightning Talks with technical leaders. As you may know, we talk to a variety of senior leaders within the tech industry to find out their story, to pick their brains, kind of learn about their journey into leadership and the secrets that they might have learned along the way. And today I'm delighted to introduce our guest, Claus Hoefele, originally from southern Germany. But him and his family have now lived in Berlin for 10 years, right, Claus?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So we did the long way around and lived a while in Australia, in Japan, but finally settled back into Germany.
Super, yeah. So Claus is a software engineering leadership professional and currently the director of engineering at On Running, which is one of the fastest growing sportswear companies globally. Here, Claus helps cross-functional software development teams to solve a lot of logistics challenges. Previous to this, Claus also gained a wide amount of experience through his years working as a software engineer. Again, as you mentioned, across multiple locations such as Japan, Australia, and Germany. And in addition to that, Claus is also the author of Drawn to Leadership newsletter, which really captures the essence of leadership concepts in the form of a visually appealing and easy to understand sketch note. So without further ado, Claus, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Yes, thank you. I'm good. Thank you so much for this nice introduction. I think we met on LinkedIn, and I really discovered the book you wrote about hiring. So obviously hiring is always something super important to technical leaders. So I'm really happy that we finally also meet up in your podcast.
Yeah, it's great to have you on board. So hopefully I've done a good job in introducing you, but for everyone listening, perhaps you can give me a more detailed overview of your career journey and an intro about yourself, Claus.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think currently I'm focusing on technical leadership, right? But this was not always been the case. I would say I have made a very classic route through different positions and different roles. So I started as a software engineer, and I had as you mentioned, I had a good time also traveling a bit the world, working in Australia and Japan, and then finally coming back into Germany. I focused quite a bit on like mobile phones and iPhones and working on apps and system technologies on mobile phones. But recently, like maybe for the last 7 or 8 years, I've focused more on leadership topics. So I'm not really hands-on anymore. I try out a couple of technologies here and there, but I really focus on collaboration. And how I got there is basically through, becoming a senior engineer, then a tech lead, then an engineering manager, and finally, in my current position as a director of engineering, I support multiple cross-functional teams. It's been an interesting journey to say the least, but I also enjoyed, like tackling different challenges and, changing myself and my approaches, not only geographically, but also what you work on and what are the current challenges in your position. So obviously the challenges between being a software engineer and being an engineering leader is very different. So it feels a bit like I've gone through multiple transformations. And hopefully I will still continue to learn new things and transform into new positions and roles.
Cool. So tell me about that first experience. I mean, taking that step from being an engineer to a team lead or a technical lead. What were the kind of pivotal things that shaped your experience, or what kind of things did you learn in that transition?
I think in the beginning, probably the trigger that made this appealing was certainly to have a bit more impact and maybe a bit being a bit involved in decisions a bit more early on, whereas as a software engineer, I would usually come in to actually implement certain things, but I was often not privy to, how are things decided, why we decided this way. So certainly this kind of was a bit the trigger to have a bit more, perhaps a bit more understanding to this. And I think what changed the most, I believe, is that software development has become fairly complex, and it's always been a team challenge. And maybe, this understanding of that, alone you can do something quickly, but together you can go far. And over time, it developed more in this career of understanding, collaboration, supporting others, and maybe not being the person who needs to have the solution, right? Like rather than helping others to come to good solutions and supporting them.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a very, very different position. When was that for you in your career? When did you actually take that jump?
I think my first, it was called tech lead position, was about 7-8 years ago, and came with a company change. So I think I really appreciate, and I still have contact to my previous manager at the time, who kind of took a bit the lead, because I didn't have leadership experience at the time. And I think a tech lead position, as it was the case at that time, was basically to some degree still being hands-on and contributing technically, but also starting to manage. And while that is a very complex combination of two different roles, it also made the step into this position a little bit easier, because I felt very comfortable with the technologies that the team was dealing with at the time. So I was also had a bit the mind space of, I can focus on learning the management part, on the leadership parts, and think about if that is really a career that I want to pursue. Because I think tech lead is maybe the last step on your journey where you have to maybe decide, hey, am I going more into an individual contributor a career, and that's totally possible, for example, with positions of senior and staff engineers, or do I go into more of a management leadership career? And at the end of the day, I felt it's so appealing that I broadened kind of my skill set in terms of management and leadership, and went that route.
Definitely. So it was kind of your boss then that kind of encouraged you to take this step, or was it always on your mind to one day this is what I want to do, or did it kind of come early for you, or do you feel it was encouraged by your boss?
Yeah, it was certainly something I was looking for to try out, and that's why it was also coming with a company change, because I couldn't achieve this goal or trying this out at my previous company. So I was looking for a position where I could try this out, right? And I think this is a very tricky approach, because usually all management positions or leadership positions expect a certain degree of experience. And again, I'm appreciative of my previous boss, who took the leap and saw some skills that I could apply in this position as well.
Brilliant. Yeah. I think, it's always a catch-22 with, I haven't got any experience, but I want to do it. But and actually having someone with experience sometimes is not always the best solution when you've already got someone who's bought into the company and what you're doing as a business.
And I think this is an important discussion, how you can also grow leadership from within the company, and by providing kind of the first steps. I mean, a training, but also on the job experience of maybe managing a smaller team, like 2-3 people. I think this is, or having these kind of in between positions. I think this is an interesting aspects of also, growing the next generation of leaders, in addition to hiring. I guess that's always a combination of both.
True. Yeah. So what has been some of the kind of pivotal moments for you as a technical leader, and or some of the kind of biggest challenges that you've had in your professional journey so far?
No. So I think in the beginning, because I was technically very focused on mobile apps and mobile phones, I think it came. I was thinking a little bit, how far can I take this leadership with the mobile specific role? And the truth is simply that in Germany, it's fairly limited because mobile app teams are not that big. So I was looking into broadening my technical skill sets, also understanding a bit more about cloud native apps, about backend technologies, about web technologies. So I think this was maybe the first 3-4 years where I then became an engineering manager with a team that had a broader tech stack than I experienced before. And I think my approach nowadays is not so much to be able to do the job myself, of course. It's more like understanding the problems that engineers have. But still, I think you have to set a bit the foundations of understanding the basics maybe of containerization or of backend technologies or distributed services. And I think this is also really important to, at the end of the day, to understand the problems that teams have. So I think this was the first few years basically to broaden my technical understanding of different environments. And from there, I always felt like I think also learning the ropes of team management, of maybe having one-on-ones, coaching people, understanding how to support them in their career journey. And over time, I think what's the main difference, in my opinion, to my current position is that the focus is much more on cross-team collaboration. So often people talk a lot about, Scrum and Kanban and agile methodologies, and this is all good and well to have in the team. But at the end of the at the end of the day, a lot of dependencies, and you often need to have several teams involved, plus maybe business stakeholders, and all working together. So I think maybe the third pivotal change was for me that I'm focusing more on facilitation techniques, running workshops, understanding how to involve people in a very interactive way. So again, to get the best out of people for them to provide the solutions rather than me, and I'm more a bit the conduit for them to come to their solution.
Yeah, because I've seen a lot of stuff that you've posted on LinkedIn, right, about leadership and things as well. And one thing that was quite interesting and is in one of your sketch notes is the concept of flow. So perhaps you can, for people who don't know this, perhaps you can tell us a bit more about it and how it applies to your leadership.
Yeah, I think there are two broad, let's say, inspirations that I draw from. One is what I mentioned about facilitation, about running workshops, helping people to collaborate better. And the other is a scientific a branch of psychology called positive psychology. It's basically the idea that maybe we are focusing too often on the negative side of things rather than amplifying what already works. And I would say flow is a big part of positive psychology. And there was a Hungarian psychologist who kind of discovered and researched this concept. And I think from a name perspective, I think a lot of people understand flow as, you're forgetting time, you are in the flow, in the moment, actually working on something that you really enjoy. And I think we are talking a lot maybe about doing exercise or sport when this happens, but why can't this happen also during work, right? That you're so deep into coding experience that it really have a very productive and enjoyable time writing software, and even between teams, interacting between the teams, actually having a setup that pair programming or ensemble programming can trigger these flows. And I like this concept because this Hungarian psychologist claims and argues that, it's not only about being productive, it's also about, enjoying your time And if you have those experience more often over time, then also you would be more happy in your life, increases well-being. And I think this is a very interesting aspect, how we as a leader can maybe set up systems to help this. And a simple example is, you're sitting in an open office, everyone is talking and taking phone calls, and you can't focus. So obviously that is a setting where that is not conducive to flow. At the same time, maybe if you're sitting on your own the entire time in a remote office, maybe you're missing your teammates and maybe some people to bounce off ideas, right? So finding this balance of collaboration, but also having focus time. I think it's an important aspect of setting up a good system for people to do their best work.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for when you're in the zone, right? It seems that time doesn't pass, and you just, before you look at it, it's midnight, and you've done a lot of work. But yeah, I get the state. So where do you feel that you've applied that technique, and how has it been a success for you or for your teams?
Yeah. Yeah, even for myself, I think it's important. As a leader, you often have 30-minute meetings back to back from morning to evening. So obviously, flow can't happen in that environment. So even for myself, I think it's important to take breaks, to have also. I started doing a lot of exercise, maybe to balance out, also to have a counterbalance to all this mental stress that you usually go through. So balancing this out, also blocking times. For example, we usually have a meeting-free Friday blocked. It doesn't always work out that way, but actually setting yourself time, a block where you could work on a strategy or on a paper, on a technical description, or some plan on how the teams could work together. I think this is important.
Definitely. I think time management is such an undervalued skill, right? If you can have discipline to that and stick to it, although that's, another challenge in itself, because I do something similar. I set out a 2-hour block if, I'm headhunting a particular role, but then I'll see something shiny on LinkedIn and I get distracted. So easier said than done.
I think there's something to be said about your own time management and also how much you can maybe focus. For example, this Pomodoro technique is very useful for me. Like, you set yourself a timer, and for 20 minutes you are working on something without touching your mobile phone or doing something else. But there is also the question, how much do you actually control your own time? Because people send you in meetings, people invite you, they ping you on Slack. And often I feel this is again something that leaders can influence. We are setting ourselves not up for success, because if everyone has to be in every meeting and no one communicates, summaries of what has happened, then probably we need more meetings and have even less focus to actually discuss everything. So I'm a big fan of asynchronous communication. Also, one person joins the meeting, then summarizes in Slack what came out of it. There are also now AI solutions for this sort of thing. So I think as leaders, we can do quite a lot to actually have people be more focused. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And for your team, Klaus, I mean, just for everyone listening, do you have a office-based team, or do you have like a distributed team that works remotely, or what does your setup look like?
So the company guideline is 2 days at the office, and the rest you can have remote. And we have a beautiful office in Berlin. It basically means that everyone is also based in and around Berlin. So we also have a big office in Switzerland. So some teams are split up between those 2 locations, but my teams, the teams that I support, they are basically, everyone is based in Berlin. And my recommendation is always, for historical reasons, Thursdays has become kind of the company office day, and I think it's good to catch the company vibe and see a lot of people on Thursdays, but also set up yourself a time for the team. Maybe pick another day where you have maybe teams, agile ceremonies, team collaboration, pair programming, and this is my recommendation for teams. And then obviously different engineers, they work differently. Some really enjoy being remote. Others come more often to the company, especially in the beginning when you're just getting onboarded. I think it's super valuable to be in the office. Apart from these 2 days, I think we have a number of setups that work.
So you mentioned obviously the 2 days in the office. So do you tend to block out those 2 days for when you have your meetings? Do you prefer to have them as, one-on-one, face-to-face time, or do you also have, see the value in remote meetings as well?
Sure, remote meetings are always part of the mix, but in person, you just can't beat in person, in my opinion. So I try to prioritize this. To be honest, for me, it's less about the time you spend at the office and more what you're doing there. So I think I prioritize personal meetings. I prioritize, and again, that's where the facilitation comes in. I prioritize in-person workshops, like the collaboration aspect. I think it's very good to do in the office, and maybe I'm seeing this a little bit as well, that offices become more a bit of event spaces where you want to collaborate intensively. So then also the rest of your time you can maybe spend remotely and do benefit from both sides. So for me, it's less about how much time you spend at the office, but make the time you spend at the office count. And I'm hoping by providing one-on-ones and workshops in person, I achieve this.
I think I saw as well recently, it's not just about being in the office, right? It's actually being with that person, because I see you mentioned about doing a one-on-one with one of your team, I think, on a walk, right, rather than sitting in the office. Is that right? So what was that like?
Yeah, and I think this benefit, this combines sort of the benefits of being in person, but also having a bit of exercise, and you get many more ideas. So I kind of do it also 2 ways. Like maybe if we are in person, we can go for a walk together, but also even if we are remote and maybe we are talking through things in a one-on-one, I can go for a walk and have the one while walking. I do this as well. Not as often as I want, but it's very a great experience. Yeah, it's a bit like not a bit like being under the shower or walking outside in nature. I think you get a lot more ideas, and I think that's a good experience.
Definitely. Just need the Berlin weather to comply most of the time.
Yes, exactly.
Cool. So we talked a bit about you mentioned a bit about like AI and things like that, and obviously there's a lot of hype around AI. So talking about technology trends, I mean, how from your opinion as a leader, what are the kind of key things that you feel are shaping the industry at the moment, from a leadership point of view? From AI to maybe machine learning or cybersecurity or blockchain or things like that.
AI is obviously a super interesting topic, and I guess we are now beyond everyone understood that ChatGPT is a great thing to do. So I think we are moving more towards operationalizing AI and embedding this into different aspects of what we're doing already. As a simple example, we have a tool. If we go into interviews, we ask the participants if we can add this tool, and it kind of summarizes the interview and kind of sends all participants a summary of the main points of this interview, and that's very good to have. Then you don't need to take notes yourself. And obviously for engineers, it's really interesting to have something like GitHub Copilot, or we are also looking into licensing. We also have Google data processing in Google Cloud. So also looking into licensing Gemini and using those things. And I think the interesting aspect is, of course, having a really good AI model is one part of the equation, but they're always like platform owners like Microsoft and their Office suite, or their ERP system, or Google and their Office suites, etc. How do we combine those, right? Because they always need to be integrated to be really useful. And yeah, I see every big provider is working on this. So it's actually now quite time consuming also, testing out things, experience, because AI is not just a checkbox, right? At the end of the day, there's a bit higher quality difference. So maybe experimenting with a lot of things, but also, assessing, what is useful and what might not be useful. So I'm currently directly involved in licensing AI tools for helping engineers to develop software, and it was quite the process to maybe select the tool, but I think we are now coming close to making a decision.
Yeah, it's interesting actually that you mentioned that, because thinking about it, it does seem like every other business has almost got some kind of an AI tool to help you with the work, right? But then, like you say, it's very time consuming going through and testing and perhaps getting the right one that fits whatever you need it to do. So interesting about the transcribing one. What is that product? I mean, that's obviously quite interesting for me as well.
So that's a MetaView. It's a bit like a general note-taking tool, but specifically for interviews. So it has a couple of advantages there.
And is it just for video interviews or voice interviews, telephone interviews? How does it work?
Yeah, basically, we use Google Meets, and you add it as a participant. It joins pretty much automatically.
Okay.
I assume they have different integrations as well.
Okay, sounds definitely super useful. What about the stuff for engineers? What's been your kind of AI tool that's got you most excited recently?
Yeah, I think from a personal perspective, you mentioned my newsletter, and I often use it to not to write the newsletter, but to get ideas, right? Or to maybe newsletter about the flow. It would be nice to have, what are the ideas out there for applying this. And then I kind of can compare this to my list of ideas that I have, and maybe there's a good one coming up, right? And this is a bit like, I think, also the approach I'm taking to AI, to have it a bit like an inspiration and kind of a buddy that helps you kind of become more productive and more better. And probably that's a bit where things are going with engineers as well. So probably it's not like AI will code everything themselves, even though it's pretty promising also, what a chat AI can actually whip up from scratch. But I think, to have this pairing partner instead of pair programming, maybe have also an AI assistant partner that can give you tips, or dig through your code base and say, hey, where do we use the same pattern or the same API? Give me a few examples. Or maybe for onboarding, right? Like, can you explain me, which repositories, which GitHub repositories are relevant for me, and maybe summarize what this is about, or who is responsible, who last touched this code. I think that's a lot of cool things you could do with AI, and I think the big code repository provider also work on this technology.
Definitely, yeah. I think having someone there as like, hey, have you thought about this, or what about this approach? Then, yeah, that'd be pretty cool, right? I think, rather than you asking AI to do the work, it's them actually saying, have you thought about doing it this way? That would be pretty cool for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So,
and I think as humans, we need to be careful that we are in charge, using AI as a tool, rather than AI dishes us some, hey human, you now do some tasks. I think this would be a very boring future.
yeah, could be. Cool. So obviously you've been in management and leadership for some time, Claus, and obviously our speciality here at Digitech is recruitment. So Obviously, hiring is a very important aspect of any engineering leader's career, because ultimately, you know, anything that's good is built by people, I believe. So, what's your approach to hiring, and how do you kind of identify people for your business, and what kind of things do you look for when considering new people?
So I've been in different experience with different companies. From basically the one extreme is that, you know, the engineering manager is basically running the entire hiring and is responsible for everything. Up to now, I think I'm in a very comfortable position that we have a very strong recruiting team, a very strong internal also outreach team. Like, we'll have a lot of great people in the talent space working for my company. That helps me a lot because, of course, I can focus a bit more on understanding what would be the best candidates. But I've also, as I mentioned, I've worked with most of the process on myself. And then, of course, you also need help from companies like yours, for example, or different tools and providers. And I think the important aspect that it's always teamwork to find the best candidates. It's not only the recruiter, but also the hiring panel and the other interviewers, right? Making sure to understand what to investigate and assess in different interviews, because you want to make sure you have all the information for a good decision, but also you don't want to draw out the interview for forever, because there are so many good opportunities for candidates this way. So it usually starts with some working with recruitment on like maybe a job description, but also an understanding, hey, these are the interviewers that we need, this is what they should focus on, and this is building the basis of making a decision. And my approach to actually the interview itself, I usually don't have a favorite question, because I think it goes a bit in the wrong direction. Like, it's not so much the question, in my opinion, that's important. It's more the assessment criteria. Like, what do you assess for, and how do you kind of assess certain answers? And for example, what I always hope to achieve with engineers is a criteria of having, you know, a thoughtful understanding of why and how to choose certain technologies, because this is never black and white, right? There's never this one perfect technology. And then you can imagine different kinds of questions, even from junior people, if they are junior, or more senior, it doesn't matter. Like, you know, why did the companies use this tech stack and not another tech stack? Or why do you use TypeScript? Or maybe why not just using JavaScript, right? Like, I really enjoy having people making, even if they can't influence it, but having, you know, thoughts about, you know, understanding the why behind it. And that's often a question and direction I ask in the interview.
Definitely understanding the why. And when it comes to recruitment, you know, from the experiences that you've seen, are there any kind of key do's and don'ts that you think are important for a company to consider when looking at their recruitment process?
Yeah, I think one aspect that we mentioned already is, don't forget that also there are people inside the companies that might be interesting, right? So that's certainly an avenue that you also should look at. And then I think from recruitment, it's probably really important to have a good understanding of what you're looking for. And that's sometimes easier said than done. Of course, everyone has a good understanding what kind of software engineers they're looking for, but we are also hiring for different heads of different departments where maybe I don't have so much experience, or maybe a role is new in the company, right? And still having a bit of, you know, investigation, research, and help in coming up with a good idea what you're looking for. I think that's the key to making hiring work.
Definitely, yeah. Having a clear objective from the beginning does definitely help. And what about the kind of minor, well, not minor, but the more intricate parts of the process? Is there anything that you feel can be done better by the industry, or things that you think other businesses should be adopting or not adopting when it comes to a process for hiring an engineer? Because we hear a lot of horror stories about, technical tests and, 7 or 8 interviews to potentially get an offer. So what's your opinion on some of the finer details?
I think a big discussion point is always the case study or practical exercise that usually companies have in an interviewing loop, right? Do you have a take-home test, or do you do pair programming, or something in between? It's really, really hard to optimize. I think at the end of the day, you have to prioritize what's more important. And I always felt that taking home tests is a bit unfair towards people who, first of all, usually apply to different jobs at the same time. But also, you can spend 2 hours, and some people don't have more time, and other people maybe spend 2 weeks on a take-home test and can polish this. So I feel that sitting in a meeting, pair programming with a focus on, how would I collaborate with this person on the other end of the video call, is a really good way of understanding, the technical skill set and the collaboration partners. And it goes both ways, right? Like usually we do the interview also with people from the team. So also as a candidate, you're getting a feeling, hey, could I work with those people, right? And maybe the result of this pair programming is not so important. It's more like, understanding, how do people think? How do they get ideas? How do they make decisions? And I feel this is a good compromise between, having some practical exercise as part of the interviewing loop, which I think is important, but also not taking too much time from candidates.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that. I never really thought about, the take-home challenge considering someone's time, because like you say, someone might have only a limited time to complete their task compared to someone who might have a lot more time on their hands. And obviously the results are going to be very different from someone who has had the time to really polish a technical task, but not always. But I guess your chances would increase by spending more time on it. So yeah,
and with a take-home test, even for me as an engineer, when I applied for engineering jobs, it was never clear, is this a checkbox? Do you just want me to fill in, some gaps in your code and get the right answer? Or is this more like a, beauty contest of can I come up with the prettiest solution with the most unit test, right? So I think often take-home tests are also not super clear on, how are they assessed in the end.
Yeah, it's always a bit of a taboo subject for sure, but I'm sure there's pros and cons for each kind of way of doing it. I remember back in the day when you didn't really have to do a coding test. It was more just coming in and jumping on the whiteboard.
Yeah.
So talking more about leadership and team management then, Claus, let's kind of dive into your approach into leadership and management, and maybe we can explore how you build effective teams, how you might foster innovation, or maybe look at promoting diversity and inclusion, or look at a positive work culture. What kind of things have you done in your career to look at those topics?
Yeah. Usually when we talk about teams, I guess it's always about cross-functional teams. I mean, some teams are more cross-functional than others, but at the very minimum, I see a product manager working with engineers as a good team setup. And then usually it's about, how can we have a scope of the team that they can work fairly autonomously. I guess it's never completely possible, but at least you can try to minimize dependencies. So they own a certain piece of the bigger puzzle. I think that's an important part, like having a good mission and vision of, what are they responsible for. And then usually you select, what kind of roles and functions do I need to make this happen. And this could be also for more consumer-oriented application, could be include design and maybe quality assurance, or maybe for more back-end kind of things. It could be that most of the engineers on the team are more back-end focused and maybe infrastructure focused. And then I think a certain aspect of this is also, what is the seniority, a difference between team members. So I don't think it's super healthy if you have an all senior team, right? I think a mix of different experiences, and it's also important for senior people to maybe mentor less experienced people on the team. I think this creates a healthy culture. Yeah, and then at the end of the day, for me, it's and I think this is very important in the times of remote. So I'm totally for remote, right? I'm working remote right now myself. At the same time, I think there's a certain team bonding that needs to happen, and I think you can do it by working remotely, but I think it's easier to do in person. So I really encourage people to also, come together, have this office day, do a couple of meetings in person, and you really see the difference on the team vibe and the how people gel in the team, right? I think it makes a big difference, and it shouldn't be excluded. Like you have to think about how people also feel like as a team, right? And not just half a dozen random people who work together for 8 hours.
Definitely. And do you also do anything like, socially as a team to create that more, that closer bond, or is it just purely, getting the team into the office and perhaps doing a few meetings together?
I mean, I think workshops are interesting in the sense that they combine kind of maybe a pleasure with work, but of course they're also like social meetings. For example, we just met yesterday at the company. We have like quarterly town halls. Then there's a bit of catering, and we all meet in the kitchen, watching the broadcast. I think it was from the US office this time. And we are all going, for example, meeting all people in Europe, meet in Zurich in a couple of weeks, also in person. So at least a big part of the company comes together in one place. And so we have quite a bit of social experience, sometimes to do with meeting, but also sometimes to do with, exercise and doing sports together. And we also host like different sports community at our new store, but also at the place where our office is located. So that's another opportunity.
Yeah, I guess it's encouraged working for a sportswear company, right?
Yeah, definitely. And again, I have done sports before and exercise, but never as consequent as I'm doing now, and I'm really enjoying it. Like, I think it's really not about, I'm not winning any gold medals or breaking records, but it's really about, have a bit of a counterbalance for your mental health as well.
Definitely. They say, healthy body, healthy mind, for sure.
Yeah.
So I guess, that it hasn't always been plain sailing as a leader. So what in your career, Claus, what's been some of the most challenging moments that you've come up against, and perhaps you can give us some examples and how you may have solved those types of solution problems.
I think because we talked about career progression, I guess in the beginning, when I was at the beginning of my leadership career, it was still, very dominated by a technical decision and, hey, I have the best solution. I think overcoming this is maybe a big challenge in the beginning. also, understanding, I think over time that maybe it's not necessarily what is actually the perfect solution, right? What is the best solution, and become a bit more flexible around this. I think usually in the past, when I was thinking, hey, it must be implemented like this, based on my technical experience, I often figured out, hey, it was actually maybe outdated information, or another solution works just as well. And becoming a bit more flexible around this, and also at the end of the day, the solution that you can realize is more important than the perfect solution that is maybe a little bit more efficient, right? It's often also working within constraints of, what the teams are capable of, and what's negotiable in the company, and becoming more flexible around this. And I've been in experience in the past where I was a little bit more, digging too deep my heels into actually making a decision, and every time I let go of maybe the decision, also go a bit with the flow of what's possible, I think we always came up with a good solution.
And do you mean a decision in terms of, what you thought was right, or was it like an opposing decision from yours to the team's decision or someone else's opinion?
Yeah, I think the former, right? That I had an idea what I think is right, and then letting go, and also accepting other solution. I think that's important.
Yeah, it's quite a hard thing to do, right? But I guess when it's important to come to a collective agreement on things, or sometimes to disagree and commit, right? I think that's
Yeah.
also important.
And because it's also important to sometimes challenge teams and say, hey, look, I understand we have done it this way, or this seems like the easiest solution, but can we do better? I think that's, of course, the flip side of this, right? Like having, in a constructive way, challenging people and teams to really come up with an interesting idea. I think that's the flip side of all of this as well.
True. So for anyone who's thinking of moving into leadership, becoming a CTO or a director or an engineering manager, what advice do you think you would give anyone who would be perhaps looking to do that in their career from what you've learned over your years?
I think an underutilized strategy is to tackle opportunities that you already have to show your leadership. And I feel there's a bit of too often there's a bit of an mindset of I have to be handed over the official position before I can actually do all this stuff. And I think the leadership can be at any level, right? Like if you work across teams and align different people to a common solution, or maybe you're suggesting something and helping others to improve what they are working on, right? There's many ways, or turning up in an all hands meeting and presenting what the team is doing. I think there are many ways of showing leadership at all levels. And my personal approach to promotion is also people should already display kind of half the skill sets that they need for the next step to get promoted. So don't wait for becoming a leader or manager officially. I think it's really about also taking opportunities, demonstrating leadership, and also help others with your leadership and skills.
Yeah, great advice. I think you can definitely apply leadership in a lot of scenarios where it's not the official title of what you do, but taking a lead in a meeting, discussing things, or helping a colleague, or doing those little things that I guess kind of contribute to those bigger things.
And we just recently had these discussions of engineers coming to me and saying, hey, look, Klaus, I think security-wise, we could improve something there. And it's maybe not my team, but also the other team needs to do something. And of course, security is important, but I have so many priorities, right? Like why do I need to be involved in this? And my message was, hey, why don't you have a look if you can, tackle this issue with the team directly without me being involved? And I think this is a sign of leadership, right? To identify issues that we need to solve and also be the driver of the change. And often this doesn't need, official management permission to do. You can also do this directly.
Yeah, a lot to be said for an empowerment for sure. I think it's quite, I think what's also important is being able to give your team the platform to be able to do that, though, right? I mean, having that psychological safety to even, probably go forward and do something like that. So it's kind of important.
And this is where maybe the approach to positive psychology, my approach to positive psychology is interesting again, because I feel you can often create such a safe space by also publicly kind of acknowledging acknowledging and appreciating what people did. I think a message in a Slack channel, hey, I appreciate that you took the initiative on fixing up this Confluence page, and now we have a better team overview. I think it can go a long way of also encouraging and empowering people and making sure that it's seen that, this is what you value in the company.
Yeah, definitely. Positive reinforcement always is a something I think as a leader should be done privately and publicly. I think publicly as well is always something that can often G up an individual for sure. At least it would for me. Brilliant. Well, look, I think we've been through a lot, Claus. I've probably stolen enough of your time as it is, but before we wrap things up, I mean, it's always cool to learn a bit more about you outside the realm of work. So perhaps you can tell us something about yourself, something informal, or perhaps something about your hobbies or things that you like to do outside of work.
Yeah, I've never thought this would happen, but I really discovered a bit my artistic side in recent years. So I've never done a lot of artworks or was very artistically inclined, but yeah, I really enjoy doing sketch notes and having some hand-drawn, digitized kind of explanations. I also use this for LinkedIn. I usually have I share my knowledge on LinkedIn and kind of combine maybe pictures and photos with some hand-drawn diagrams as well. I think it's a very neat style, and fortunately, it doesn't need too many skills. And I also appreciate how easy these days digital tools make this. So I'm using an iPad with an Apple Pencil, and there's Procreate or Adobe Fresco, but they really make it fairly easy, even for me to draw this. And I think it's a bit unusual for technical people, but it's also kind of good, balancing out a bit more the artistic and the more rational side. I think it's a good balance to have.
Definitely. So, yeah, I've seen some of the sketch notes. I always thought you kind of got them professionally done, but you do them by hand then, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the interesting part for me is also I'm sometimes a bit of a perfectionist, so I like to draw things very exactly. And after a while, I realized that I don't even like this, and I really like this, wiggly lines, not perfect thing. And it also helps me in my work, if I think about it, hey, this could be even more efficient and even more perfect. I think about my sketch notes, which I really like because they are a little bit, wiggly and not quite straight. So it helps me in this space as well.
Cool. Well, I guess that is still kind of comes back to work. But what other things do you do outside of work, Claus? Obviously, you've got a family as well, right?
Yeah, that takes a lot of space and time, of course. I guess my kids get older, so they also become a bit more independent. I recently discovered a bit more also. I increased my exercise regime, so I go, I think 5 times a week now to do different sorts of exercises. So I have increased that as well. Yeah, so plenty of things to do, and I'm looking forward. We just mentioned it in the talk before the recording, right? That the Easter is coming up, and having a few days off and just enjoying the time with the family. I think that's a good way to spend time.
Indeed, yeah, for sure. And what's the go-to exercise then, Klaus? So what's the bit of exercise that you enjoy doing the most?
Yeah, I do quite a bit of strength training. So there's body pump that I enjoy. Like I think it's a program that different studios offer. Yeah, I do this once or twice a week, and then some cardio, running, swimming, this sort of thing.
Brilliant. Definitely a good way to keep fit and healthy, and I'm sure On Running will be supporting you doing that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Well, look, Klaus, I really appreciate your time. It's been fantastic having you on this podcast, and I'm sure our listeners will get a lot of value from your experiences and the things that you shared with us in this podcast. I'll be sharing a link to Klaus's LinkedIn as well as his other concepts and newsletters. So if anyone's interested in seeing those, then please click on the links below. But yeah, thanks for having us. Thanks for being on, Klaus. Sorry, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much for this discussion, Paul.
All right, take care. Bye for now.
Bye.